The cabin door creaked open to the hush of snowfall, but no one came through. Just the wind. And then a whisper. He stood there, barefoot, bleeding and barely breathing, his shadow stretching long across her wooden floor. She had aimed her rifle before she even saw his face, and when she did, her hands trembled, not from fear, but from something older than grief, older than hate. His skin carried the desert sun. His braid was dark as the ravens watching from the pines, and on his chest, the jagged mark of a bullet she did not fire, but might have wanted to. Outside, the snow began to fall harder. Inside, time stood still. By spring, they'd call her a traitor. By summer, they'd call her a wife. But before any of that, she stitched his wound shut by the fire, not knowing she was sewing her own fate closed, too. He had no right to live. She had no reason to save him. And yet, they would both pay the price. For that moment, subscribe now because tomorrow's story will haunt you even deeper. You'll need it. But before that, let me take you to the day it all began. The wind carried dust like old secrets across the brittle boards of Dry Creek. It was a town built on rusted iron, broken treaties, and promises never kept. The saloon still stood, crooked and loud, and the church bell still rang, though no one much listened anymore. And just beyond it, past the low cemetery hill where the grass refused to grow, stood a lonely cabin with warped walls and a single plume of smoke rising steady into the sky. That smoke was the only sign that someone still lived there. Her name was Ada Whitlow. She didn't come to town much, and when she did, no one looked her in the eyes. Not out of fear, not even pity. Just habit. The same way you don't look too long at a grave that hasn't sunk yet. Ada had been a wife once. That much everyone knew. Her husband, Elias, was a farmer and a kind one, until the war made him cruel. He came home with dead eyes and left again 2 winters later, this time for good. Folks said he was taken by raiders. Some whispered he ran. Ada never said. She just stopped speaking much at all. They whispered other things too, about her limp, about the long scar behind her ear, half hidden in her hair. Some said she was born broken. Others claimed she was thrown from a horse or caught in a fire. But the truth was quieter than any of that. And sadder. The day Elias left, she didn't chase him. That's what they remembered most, not the blood on the porch, not the broken rifle, just that she let him go. And after that, Dry Creek let her go too. The silence in her cabin wasn't peaceful. It clung to her, a second skin. Mice in the walls, wind in the rafters, a kettle that whistled too long before she remembered it was. On she spent her days sewing, mending and pulling stubborn weeds from frozen soil that didn't want her to succeed. The crops grew small, the hens laid less and less, but she carried on. That's what widows did. They carried things. Sometimes she'd talk to herself, just to hear a voice. Not out loud, just the kind of talking that lives behind the teeth. The kind that sounds like memory. Elias used to call her June even when it was snowing, said she bloomed when she was angry. These days, Ada didn't bloom at all. She'd gone half deaf after the fire in the shed. That's what she told the doctor when he rode in from 2 towns over. Just the left ear, she said, but he looked at her hands raw and burned and said nothing. Now when the townsfolk came up the path, rare as that was, she could see their mouths moving before she heard them. She learned to watch for shadows on their faces, not kindness. Children avoided her. Dogs barked too long at her scent. And the preacher's wife once left a pie on the porch and never came back for the dish. That was fine. Ada didn't ask for much. She had the firewood, the quilt her mother stitched, and the old wedding ring she wore around her neck like a secret. That was enough, until the day the snow came early, and brought something with it. The storm rolled, and quick. Heavy flakes fell like pieces of sky tearing loose. Ada had just stoked the fire when she heard it, a thump outside, soft but sharp, like someone had dropped a sack of potatoes against the wall. She waited. Another thump, closer now, against the door. She reached for the rifle, Elias's rifle. Though, the barrel had rusted and the trigger stuck when it was cold. Still, she cradled it with both hands, limped to the door, and opened it slow. There, in the snow, lay a man, barely more than a boy. His skin was bronze, his hair long and wet, braided, with beads and ash. His chest rose shallow beneath torn leather. One leg was wrapped in a soaked bandage that had long since failed its purpose, and his eyes, when they flicked open, were the color of burned amber, wild and sharp, even as he lay dying. Ada should have shut the door. She should have let the storm take him, like it had taken everything else. But she didn't. She dropped the rifle. She knelt beside him. And for the first time in years, she spoke aloud to someone other than herself. "Don't you die here," she whispered, though he couldn't have understood her words. Still, he blinked once, as if to say, "I'll try." That was the day her silence broke. The day the town's whispers would grow louder than ever, and the day her life began again, though not in the way she hoped, not in the way any storybooks would ever tell it. The storm didn't pass that night. It howled and circled like a hungry thing. The windows frosted, white, and the wind beat against the shutters like it wanted in. But inside the cabin, the world had gone still. She had dragged him in with more strength than she thought she had, left streaks of blood across the wooden floor, stripped off his soaked clothes, careful and quick, like she was mending a torn shirt, not tending to a stranger. The fire roared, the kettle screamed. She wrapped him in quilts and silence. By morning, the fever had set in. She ground willow bark and mashed dried root, barely remembering how she'd learned such things. Maybe her mother. Maybe a book she burned years ago. She spoke to him in soft words he couldn't hear. "You shouldn't be alive," she said once, dabbing his brow with a rag. "But maybe neither should I." It took 2 days for him to open his eyes again, 3 before he could sit up without falling. He didn't speak at first, just watched her from under dark lashes, unmoving except for the slow turn of his head when she moved across the room. His gaze was unreadable, sharp but not unkind. Curious, maybe. She noticed he never looked at her limp when she walked, never flinched at the scar that ran behind her ear. He looked at her face, at her eyes, as if she were whole, as if she had always been. She wasn't used to that. His name, when he gave it, was Koa. He said it like a secret, slow and low, shaped by a voice still raw with pain. His accent was strange to her ears, but not unfamiliar. Like a song heard once in a dream, she asked nothing more of him, not where he came from, not what tribe, not why his chest bore the old mark of a soldier's brand. Some things didn't need to be named. Pain especially had its own language. He sat by the fire, hands wrapped around a tin mug, and watched the snow melt from the window ledge. "You saved me," he said once. Ada didn't answer. She was slicing turnips, her hands steady but her heart full of static. "You didn't have to." She looked at him then, held his gaze like it was a sharp edge she'd grown tired of fearing. "No," she said quietly. "I didn't." Word got out, as it always does in small places where life is dull and judgment is easy. Mrs. Elkin saw a shadow through Ada's cabin window, broad-shouldered, not her own. The storekeep noticed she hadn't come for flour, not since the blizzard, and the pastor's boy, too curious for his own good, claimed he saw a brown-skinned man limping near her well. By the end of the week, whispers ran faster than horses through Dry Creek. "Could be a runaway," someone said. "Could be worse," said another. "She's always been strange," came the quietest voice. "Maybe he's not the danger. Maybe she is." Ada felt it the next time she walked into town. The way conversation thinned around her like mist, burning off in sunlight. She couldn't hear the words, not clearly, but she didn't need to. Koa saw it too. He had insisted on walking with her, even though his legs still shook beneath him. She didn't want him to come. But he had. People stared, and he stared back, silent, tall and unblinking. That silence said more than any threat ever could. and maybe that was why they left her alone. For now. Back at the cabin, she found herself listening for his footsteps, the creak of floorboards as he paced, the scrape of chair legs as he shifted his weight. He never took more than she gave. Never crossed a line, but lines blurred easily in quiet rooms and long winters. They played cards by lamplight, hands brushing once, then again. A glance across the table lingered longer than it should. One night he asked her what her favorite season was. She answered, "The end of winter." "Not spring?" he asked. She shook her head. "Spring's a promise, but winter ending, that's proof." He nodded like he understood something deeper than the words. A week passed, then another. He healed faster than she thought a man could. Still limped, but the color came back to his face. His voice steadied. He helped her stack wood, even when she said she didn't need it. She didn't stop him. The silence between them became something else, not empty, but full. Full of things that didn't need saying. Still, there were moments. Moments when she caught him staring into the fire too long, jaw clenched. Moments when he flinched in sleep, muscles tense, as if waiting for a blow that never came. And once, she found him outside just before dawn, shirtless in the snow, pressing his palm to the frost-covered earth like he was listening for something. She asked him softly, "Will someone come looking for you?" He looked at her, slow and steady. No one who would ask permission. She said nothing more. But after that, she started keeping her oil lamp lit through the night. Just in case. One evening the wind changed. It wasn't the kind of change you could see, no storm clouds, no thunder. But it smelled different. The air was sharper, and the silence in the woods had a shape to it. Koa felt it first. His shoulders stiffened. He stepped outside without a word, eyes scanning the tree line like it had spoken to him. Ada followed. They stood together on the porch, the snow crunching under their boots, the sky deepening into indigo. "I should leave soon," he said finally. She didn't answer, just looked at the horizon. "There are people who wouldn't understand this," he said. "Me here, you, helping me. There are people who wouldn't understand anything," she replied. He turned to her, and there was a gentleness in his expression she hadn't seen before. Not pity, not gratitude, just seeing, really seeing. "You are not what they say you are," he said. She looked down at her hands, still marked by burns, still rough from soil and grief. "I'm not what I used to be either." He stepped closer, not touching, not yet, just near enough that she could feel his warmth even in the cold. "You're something better," he said. And then, quiet again. Not the silence of loneliness, but the kind that holds something sacred, something beginning. That night she dreamt of a place with red earth and singing winds, a place that was his, not hers, but one he had invited her into. And somewhere in that dream she realized, she didn't want him to leave, but dreams don't last long in Dry Creek, especially not the kind that feel like peace. The thaw came early that year. The snow melted in streaks, leaving behind patches of stubborn ice and long trails of mud that sucked at your boots. The sun still felt like a stranger, but the birds had started singing again. Soft, cautious notes like they weren't sure they were allowed to hope. Ada didn't trust it. She didn't trust much anymore, except the sound of Koa's breath at night and the rhythm of his footsteps on the porch. They didn't speak of what lay ahead. Not yet. But something fragile had begun to bloom between them. Not passion, not yet love. Just a quiet knowing. So when she came to town that morning, shoulders square and chin high, it was with a sliver of light beneath her ribs. A sense that maybe the worst had already come and gone. She was wrong. It happened at the general store. She needed flour, salt, something sweet if they had it. Koa offered to come, but she shook her head. "They'll see you as the problem," she said. "Let me be the trouble instead." He hadn't smiled, but he'd understood. Inside the store, everything went still the moment she entered. No surprise there. She walked with her limp, kept her hands in her coat, and said nothing but what she needed. The new deputy was there. A boy in a man's badge. Elijah Graves, sharp-jawed and desperate to prove he mattered. He watched her too long as she paid. Tapped his boot like he was waiting for something. Then he stepped forward and said too loudly, "You know, some folks are wondering why a widow needs 2 plates set at supper." Ada didn't flinch. She gathered her things, but he wasn't finished. "You feeding strays now, Miss Whitlow, or just sleeping with them?" The silence that followed was thick and sharp. Someone near the stove coughed. A coin dropped. Ada turned to leave. Elijah grabbed her wrist. It wasn't hard, wasn't rough, but it was enough. Enough to light the fuse that had been waiting for months. Her sack fell. Flour burst across the wooden floor like a ghost escaping. And there, in front of everyone, he pulled back her coat collar, revealed the edge of a beaded cord. Koa's necklace, left on her nightstand. She'd worn it by accident, and now it was proof. Proof that she wasn't just strange or grieving or mad. She was with him. Someone laughed, someone muttered, someone spit on the floor. She didn't cry, she didn't shout. She just walked. Out the door, down the street, through the wind that had begun to rise again. She didn't stop until the town was far behind her. Didn't stop when the road turned to rock, or when her limp worsened, or when her breath came ragged and sharp. The sky darkened. A storm she hadn't seen coming now gathered fast. She climbed the ridge behind the cemetery hill. She used to go there with Elias, back when he still loved her in the daylight. At the top, the wind knocked her sideways, and there, surrounded by graves, dust, and cold, she finally broke. She dropped to her knees, the earth too frozen to give. Her hands found her face. She shook in silence, the kind of silence that comes after too many years of swallowing everything whole. She didn't pray. She just stopped. She didn't hear Koa approach, but she felt it, a presence like warm smoke, like shelter. He didn't speak right away, just stood beside her, no questions, no demands, just there. She didn't lift her head. He knelt slowly, one knee cracking against the earth. Still, nothing. Then, quietly, he held out something wrapped in cloth. It was the beaded necklace. "I saw you left it," he said. "Didn't want you to lose it." She stared at it, then at him. "Why did you come?" she asked, voice dry as dust. He looked at the hills, at the town below, at the sky bruising with thunder. "Because you didn't." For a long while they stayed like that, wind howling, grief circling. Then she spoke again. "They think I'm broken," she said. "Always have. Since I didn't scream when Elias left. Since I didn't fight back when the fire came. Since I kept breathing when I shouldn't have." Koa's jaw clenched, but he didn't interrupt. "I didn't save you because I'm good," she whispered. "I did it because I didn't want to be alone anymore. That's all." Now he looked at her, and when he spoke, his voice was the softest it had ever been. "Then I'm glad you were lonely." She let out something between a laugh and a sob, turned away. "I'm not strong, Koa." He didn't smile, didn't disagree, just reached out, not to hold her, not yet, but to press his hand against hers where it lay in the dirt. Fingers calloused like hers. Worn the same. "You don't have to be," he said. "Not with me." They sat there until the cold began to sting. Then slowly, together, they rose, back down the hill, back toward the cabin, not in triumph, not in romance, just side by side, whole, in the way that only scars make you. That night, she didn't cry, didn't speak much either. But when he sat beside her by the fire, she leaned into him, and he let her. They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. Some promises are louder in silence. They thought she was broken, but someone saw gold in the ashes. The days that followed did not offer mercy. Spring arrived only on the calendar, not in the sky, not in the earth. The wind blew sharp as judgment, and the thaw brought rot before it brought bloom. But still, they worked. Ada rose before the sun and lit the hearth. Koa hauled what little lumber remained from the back woodshed. Together, they patched the roof, mended the chicken coop, and cleared the stones from the overgrown patch behind the cabin. They did not speak of the town, they did not speak of the shame. They built instead. Each board nailed, each seed planted, each moment shared in silence. It was all a kind of defiance, not loud, not proud, just real. By mid-April, the garden had taken shape. 3 long rows of green poked through the soil, and a crude fence now circled the pasture where 2 borrowed horses grazed, both skittish, both lean, but alive. Koa fashioned a rough saddle tree from pine. Ada traded preserves for old nails and scraps of leather. They planned, not a future, not yet, but a beginning. We could raise them, she said one evening, nodding toward the horses. Break them gentle. Train them for the farms west of Dry Creek. He looked at her hands, calloused and cracked, then back at the pasture. Together? She gave him a rare smile. Only if you let me name them. And yet, there was always a shadow, a weight behind her ribs that no warmth could melt. Sometimes she would stare into the fire too long, fingers twitching like they remembered something she didn't want to say aloud. Koa never pried. But one morning, as they walked the edge of the creek, he asked, gently, "What did they take from you?" Ada didn't answer at first. Just watched the water. Watched it cut through the earth like a blade that didn't care who bled. Then, I was 15 when I married Elias Whitlow. Koa listened, quiet as snowfall. I thought he loved me. He said I was soft, said I was quiet, said he liked that. A bitter laugh escaped her. Turns out he liked that I wouldn't talk back. She told him of the years after, the long silences, the looks from townsfolk, the fire that burned the barn while Elias was gone, and she stood, too numb to scream, watching everything go black. They said I should have done more, she whispered. Save the horses, save the crop, save the man who wasn't even there. She turned to Koa then. I thought the fire would kill me. But it didn't. He nodded. Once, and now you're building one again. They didn't speak of it after that. But something softened in her. And in him. He began to tell his own story, not all at once but in pieces, around the fire, in the fields. Sometimes in the quiet after dusk. He had once worn a soldier's coat, not by choice, but by force. Taken young, made to march under a name that was not his. They called me William, but that wasn't me. He escaped the barracks, disappeared into the southern hills, lived among outcasts, runaways, old warriors who'd lost everything but pride. I wasn't running, he said. I was remembering who I really was. Ada, listening in silence, understood more than she said. Their bond grew like the garden, slow, stubborn, strong. They built a new stall behind the cabin, dug a well deeper than the old one, painted the front door red. To spite the dust, she said, and for a while, the world let them be. But peace is a borrowed thing in places like Dry Creek. It began with hoofbeats, fast, angry ones. Ada was bringing in the last crate of pickled beets when she saw them. 3 riders, riding hard. One of them wore a badge, Deputy Graves. The other 2 she didn't know, but their eyes were the same. Men who'd never let go of the war. The kind who thought peace was a weakness. Koa stepped out of the barn, shirt damp with sweat. The riders slowed. Dust curled behind them like smoke. Got a tip, Graves called out. Said a known fugitive's hiding on this property. Ada's jaw tightened. Koa said nothing. Graves dismounted, slow and theatrical. Let his fingers rest on his belt, near the holster but not quite touching. Now I don't want trouble, he said. Just want the truth. Ada stepped forward. There's no law here, she said. Not on my land. He smirked. That so? She nodded. You're not. Welcome. Something in her tone cracked the false charm. Graves's face darkened. You're protecting a man with blood on his hands. Ada glanced at Koa, then back to the deputy. No, she said. I'm standing beside a man who carries his scars the right way. They didn't fight, not with fists, not with guns, but with something steadier. Koa handed Graves a folded paper. An old army document with no signature, no trail. The deputy sneered, knowing it wouldn't hold up in court. But court was far, and winter had teeth. He backed off, for now. But not before looking Ada in the eye and saying, "Lo, people remember things, Miss Whitlow. Sooner or later they'll make you choose." She didn't flinch. I already did. That night the fire burned hot. Ada stood at the hearth, her hand resting on the mantel, breath tight in her chest. Koa came to her side, placed a small bundle on the table. "What's this?" "Letters," he said. "From the others. My kin. They're north now, near the border." She opened one. The words were neat, careful, written in a mix of languages, English, Apache, and symbols only. "They would know. They want you to come?" she asked. He nodded. "They said there's land, horses, no lawmen, no whispers." She held the paper as if it might burn. Then, "And do you want to go?" Koa stepped close, not touching, just near enough. "I want you." She didn't move. "But I won't ask you to follow me into shadow," he said. "Not if you finally found your son." Ada looked toward the window, toward the stable, the fields, the painted red door. This was her land. But what good was land if it stayed a cage? They sat together on the porch that night, the stars above them endless, the sky soft with coming change. "Tell me," she whispered, "what kind of horses do they raise?" "Fast ones," he said. "Mountain-born. Free." She smiled, then leaned against his shoulder. "Maybe I'd like that." He placed a hand over hers, and she didn't pull away. The next morning she packed 2 saddlebags, filled them with seeds, and firewood, and everything she didn't want to leave behind. Then she opened the front door, the red one last time. They thought she was broken, but someone saw gold in the ashes, and together they lit a fire no wind could put out. They came back to town one last time, not to beg, not to fight, not even to be seen, just to say goodbye. The fields behind the cabin had bloomed wild with early summer. Clover, thistle, wheatgrass bent in the breeze. Ada braided a crown of sage and tucked it in her satchel. For courage, maybe. Or memory. Koti wore his cleanest shirt and no weapons. His eyes held no fear, only stillness. They rode in on horseback. Hers a dapple gray mare she'd raised from a foal. His a black gelding quiet as smoke. And as they passed the first porch, someone whispered her name, but she didn't look. The church bell rang noon. The square was half full. The blacksmith paused mid-swing. The baker leaned on her doorway, flour streaking her apron. Even Deputy Graves stood at the saloon steps, arms folded, jaw clenched. They stopped in front of the general store, the same place where the laughter had once broken her spirit like dry glass. She dismounted slowly, each step quiet, steady. The townsfolk watched. Not angry this time, just unsure, faces caught between shame and curiosity. Koa remained at her side, and then she did the impossible. She spoke. "My name is Ada Whitlow," she said, voice clear as creek water. "And I am leaving." No one breathed. "I'm not asking for permission. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I am just telling you." She looked at them all. Not as enemies, not as ghosts, just people who never saw her clearly. "This man is my husband." She didn't mean legally. She didn't have to. She meant in the ways that counted. "In your eyes, I was always broken. Quiet. Strange. But I was never lost. I just hadn't been found yet." A long silence followed. And then, from behind the counter window, an old woman, one who'd once given Ada thread and never charged her, raised a hand. Not in warning. In farewell. They rode out together as the wind picked up. Koa never looked back, but Ada did. Not in sorrow, in peace, because this time, she was not leaving something behind. She was going toward something. Weeks passed. The road turned to trail, then to mountain path. They crossed the wide river where the moon shimmered like silver coins tossed from heaven. They passed through cedar, forests where the earth smelled like rain and rebirth. And finally, they reached the High Valley, a place where no one knew her name, and where she could choose who she wanted to be. They built a home with their hands, laid each stone like a prayer. They grew wildflowers around the door and named the horses after stars. When the time came, they stood together beneath a sky thick with starlight. No preacher, no paper, just two voices. One promise. "I'll be your fire," she whispered. "And I'll be your shelter," he answered. They sealed it with quiet hands, and the wind hushed for a moment, as if the earth itself had paused to listen. A year later, a child was born, a boy with Ada's calm eyes and Koa's steady silence. They named him Elias, not after the man who had left her, but after the name itself, the one that meant, "Yahweh is my salvation." A name, reborn. Like her. And when Ada told him stories of storms and dust, of gardens and ghosts, of the fire that tried to claim her, she ended with the same words every time. "I was never a curse. I was someone's miracle all along. Subscribe, and let me introduce you to the next miracle tomorrow."